Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we have a deck guide on Earth Machine. Now no need to just look at the deck and just copy down everything. I'm gonna go over it one by one. Unfortunately it's DB, so I can't really just show them one by one. Sometimes it's gonna be difficult to just yeet all the information, every single card on the screen at once. Hopefully if you're interested, if you want to learn deck, this video will incite you to get into Earth Machine. And if you really like the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let's get to it. So starting off, I'll go over the general plan and how the deck is kind of built. So Earth Machine, it just uses a lot of really good Earth Machine support. There's a ton of it. For example, few prime ones are Super Express Bullet Train, Machina Metal Cruncher, Super Heavy Fried Derrick Crane, and extra stuff like Ancient Gear Ballista, Machina Overdrive. There are just lots of them, and you're using all of these cards to build a deck that does not only grind, but it's also able to put up it also has an absolutely massive toolbox in the form of the extra deck. It has tons of options to go into, and it just really pops off super well. Probably my only complaint about the deck is with certain hands it can be fragile, so that's kind of the only main downside to playing it. Otherwise it has really strong options, really consistent, really grindy, has it's pretty strong in terms of disruption too. It can be difficult for some decks to play through single torrential or a Machina Overdrive into Citadel. So right now, hopefully that kind of explains the main thing. Another really big thing about the deck, it aims to form a resource loop between double-headed Anger Knuckle, Super Heavy Bullet Train, Super Express Bullet Train, and Ancient Gearbox. Anger Knuckle is able to revive Bullet Train from your graveyard each turn, which you put into the graveyard with your combo. You are able to send it to the graveyard through stuff like Overdrive, Torrential, Citadel, any of that stuff. And then during the end phase, Anger Knuckle has to send a monster from your hand to the graveyard for its effect to activate. So you just send the Ancient Gearbox, and during the end phase, Bullet Train adds that Ancient Gearbox back to your hand, but then box will trigger, adding another Earth Machine with 500 attack or defense, which we run a couple of, Double Trencher, Tunneler, and Anchor Drill. So that's kind of the main game plan. The deck by itself doesn't put up any interruptions, but you want to just generate enough advantage from the draw 2 that Tunneler gives, which you are very easily able to set up in your combo. And you're hoping to draw into one of your 16 forms of interruption, 10 traps, 6 hand traps, really toolboxy in a nutshell. So let's get started to the deck. We have 12 starters in Infinite Track Harvester, Machina Metal Cruncher, a Machina Redeployment, and Triple Heavy Forward. So Infinite Track Harvester, the first one, pretty straightforward effect. When it's normal summoned, add an Infinite Track. You're mainly going to be adding Brutal Dozer, since this is your main way to get access to the full line. It extends a lot. So Harvester, that's its main use, just normal summon it. Add a Brutal Dozer. If you already have access to it, you can get access to stuff like Anchor Drill, Trencher, any of that. Its second effect is also pretty important in terms of deck. Its ability to change its level. The lower level Infinite Track monsters, they have this one effect to just modulate levels in a way where you target another machine monster you control. Both of those monsters' levels become the sum of those two targets. To put it simply, if Infinite Track Harvester targets a monster, for example Machina Fortress, since Harvester is level 2 and Fortress is level 7, 2 plus 7 is 9, both of them become level 9. So that's kind of its main play. That effect is pretty important too. If you target a train with it, both become level 12, so you hard summon Zeus, and you almost never summon Zeus with its main materials by attacking with the machine. With any Xyz monster, you're usually just hard summoning it 90% of the time you do summon it, which isn't actually that frequent. You can also like go into stuff like Mountain Smasher, and if you have an Infinite Goliath under Mountain Smasher, you're able to do some really cool stuff. For example, Machina Citadel, if it targets an indestructible monster, so any monster with Infinite Goliath under it, Infinite Goliath is able to attach itself to any Xyz material you control when sent to Xyz monster you control when sent to the graveyard. So it just gives that monster instant indestructibility. And if you target it with Overdrive, which summons a Machina from your deck, then destroys a machine, the machine isn't destroyed. It's able to get advantage like Citadel and Metal Cruncher. Citadel tries to destroy a machine you control in order to blow up every monster your opponent controls with attack less than it. But the thing is, it doesn't have to specifically destroy that monster, although all it needs is that monster to be present on the field and the ability to attempt to destroy it. So Machina Citadel can target an indestructible monster. It resolves. Having the ability to just be indestructible is very useful in the deck. So a couple of more important targets for Harvester are your Fortress. As I said, you go into stuff like Earth Slicer, pop 2, or even 3 if you have a heavy forward on the field. And that's kind of its main play. I don't think, like, you could theoretically make a Libe, but it's just so, like, not practical. You could theoretically over 2 turns make 4 level 11 monsters and overlay them into a Libe, but just don't. That's just a really dumb thing that is possible, but you're never going to do. You have triple Machina Metal Cruncher. If you have no face-up cards, you're able to normal summon it without tributing. And the thing is, it says no face-up cards, meaning not even spells or traps. So sometimes a heavy forward can come in the way of it, since it's a continuous spell. So if you ever have Metal Cruncher and heavy forward in the same hand, always remember to normal summon Metal Cruncher first. And what it says, when it's normal or special summoned, you're able to reveal 3 Earth Machines and randomly add one of them to your hand. Your main target, similar to Harvester, is the Brutal Dozer. If you already have access to Brutal Dozer, I'd recommend getting access to an extender like Derrick Crane, Bullet Train, Fortress, any of that. And the thing is, it also triggers on special summons, so you're able to summon from Overdrive if you already have a Citadel in your graveyard, since Citadel is able to summon itself when a machine you control is destroyed. So Metal Cruncher really helpful in that regard. You have triple Machina Redeployment. It's able to add 2 Machina monsters or 2 Machina cards depending on what you discard. If you already have access to like a Fortress, Citadel, Metal Cruncher, if you already have one of those monsters in your hand, you are 99.9% of the time going to be searching at least one Overdrive, because having access to a guaranteed disruption is pretty important. So if you discard a Machina card, you're able to search Overdrive, but if you just discard any random card, you can only search one of the Machina monsters. So if you're already using up your Citadel and your Fortress, if you already have them in circulation, that effect to search any 2 Machina monsters might become redundant. So that's important to keep note. Just really solid card overall. A good thing to know is that if they do not Ash this, it means they just don't have Ash Blossom whatsoever, so you're free to go on with all your plays. Finally, for starters, we have triple heavy forward. It adds an Infinite monster. We'll be searching Harvester, since we need that Earth Machine body on the field instead of directly searching Brutal Dozer. Oh yes, and by the way, redeployment just searches Metal Cruncher. That's why it started. And its second effect is also pretty important, since it's able to, you can target a machine Xyz monster you control. You can either change its battle position or attach it to it as material. Often you kind of, it depends on the game state which effect you're using. All of the Infinite Track Xyz monsters, they have the effect in the graveyard to summon themselves from the graveyard in defense position. So the ability to change them to attack just increases your OTK potential by a lot, since they are some very beefy cards. And it can even attach itself as material. So you can attach it to something like a River Stormer if you want to get its search. You can attach it to like a Mountain Smasher if you really want to get 1000 attack. You can attach it to an Earth Slicer, which is usually its main point where it is going to attach itself in order to pop 3 cards. And there's a really cool play with the Earth Slicer where if it's in defense, then you can just pop itself, and then you can revive a Citadel from graveyard if you haven't used one already. So heavy forward, all its effects you're going to be using all the time. Next up for our main like combo pieces, I should probably put this here. For combo pieces, we have triple Dozer, double Trencher, 1 Tunneler, 1 Bullet Train. You will get all of these in rotation during the process of your combo. Dozer is probably the most important one, since you need it to get other pieces from your combo into it. It's kind of like a pseudo starter. If you have any normal summon plus Dozer, that's full combo too. I'll go over the combo line later, but Dozer usually summoning Trencher or Tunneler, depending on if you already have Trencher in your hand, or in a more like, if you have your graveyard loaded with a Trencher already, you want to summon stuff like Harvester or Anchor Drill so that you can link them off into a Link 1 Goliath, and then you're able to revive them off Trencher. They have their abilities negated by Bulldozer, but they don't have their abilities negated by Trencher, so you're able to get their abilities off, such as Harvester's Plus or Anchor Drill Summon. This effect does lock you into Earth Machine, so you want to be careful about that. You won't be able to go into even a Zeus, since it's a light machine, not an Earth machine. You won't be able to go into Dingirsu, BLS, any of those cards. So you do want to be careful when you are using this card. If you have plays that involve stuff like Zeus or Dingirsu, I've gotten so used to saying Dingirsu as a meme, it just came out, I'm sorry. You just want to do those plays before using Dozer, so that's something to keep in mind. Trencher, it's basically a Monster Reborn. Don't forget that all of the level 5 Infinite Track monsters need to tribute an Earth Machine or summon themselves, so you need that board presence. Trencher is able to banish itself from the graveyard to reborn an Infinite Track. It has to be an Infinite Track with a level, so you cannot summon stuff like any of your Xyzes or your Links. And Trencher, it doesn't negate its effect, so if you're dumping something like an Anchor Drill or Harvester off something like Dozer, Fortress, River Storm's effect, because it can send cards to the graveyard too instead of adding it to your hand, Trencher comes up in all of those situations. Next up we have the 1 copy of Tunneler. You only really need the 1 copy since it's a Pot of Avarice. It's a searchable Pot of Avarice. On top of that, you're only really going to use it once, and then after that you're going to grind, and it's going to be kind of difficult to fill your graveyard with the monsters and get access to Tunneler if you're running more than 1 copy. So you're usually relying on cards like Magna Overdrive to recycle extra stuff. Magna Overdrive can also recycle banished machines if it's in your graveyard, so you're usually recycling Trencher and Tunneler regardless. We have and very important card in the mirror match. You always want to wait for this card and ash it, since it's your main way to get access to disruption. Since as I said, this deck can't put up any disruption by itself, so you have to manually draw into them, and you're running 16, so it's very, very likely. I believe it was like a 4 or 5% chance of drawing into a disruption, probably higher, can't remember the exact number. Super Express Bullet Train. At first it seems like your normal extender. If all monsters you control are Earth Machines, just summon it. But what's more important here is its second effect, to recover machines from your graveyard during the end phase, since this deck is very grindy. You want to constantly have access to that second effect. You're going to add a plethora of different cards. During turn 1, you're usually adding Bulldozer back to your hand as follow-up. You can add stuff like Ancient Gearbox. Its effect will trigger if it's added from graveyard to hand too. If it's added from your deck or graveyard to your hand, you just add an extra Earth Machine. You're able to add stuff like maybe even a Derek Crane, just as an extra extender. It's just very, very versatile in its use. On top of that, it can even go for an OTK potentially. A cool thing to know about it is, since it cannot declare an attack unless you send 2 other cards, negating its effects will actually bypass that condition. So if you negate its effects with something like Cleave for Genius, or just summoning it back with Anger Knuckle, since Anger Knuckle negates effects, this is just an OTK machine. Next up, we have our extenders: 1 Fortress, 1 Drill, 1 Derek Rain. Fortress, just your generic summon for free. You always have to keep in mind every single one of its effects. You discard machine monsters from your hand whose level equal 8 or more to summon it from your hand or graveyard, so it's always accessible. And something very important to know is that it can discard itself for cost. So if you have it in your hand, you're instantly getting a level 7 as its discard cost. So that's very important. Next, its ability: when it's destroyed by battle, whether you attack or your opponent attacks, it destroys a card your opponent controls. That is mandatory. And has a third effect which you're very rarely going to resolve. But if your opponent targets this with a card effect, you get to look at their hand and rip a card. On paper, that's bonkers until you realize that your opponent has to target it with an effect. So with a monster effect specifically, not just any effect, a monster effect. So it can be kind of hard against, I guess, Generator. That effect can come up. But looking into your opponent's card and ripping a card is always cool. And I don't believe that effect activates, if I recall correctly. It just happens while the chain is resolving. So just remember every single one of its effects. Even though they may be niche, you always want to remember them. Fortress is crash ability, probably MVP. Anchor Drill, you are generally searching this if you already have access to most of your pieces. You search this as a follow-up normal summon, and it's really good it's a really good search of heavy forward if you already have access to Brutal Dozer, since now if your opponent even ashes Brutal Dozer, you still have enough material to go into a ballista and still pop off. So that is a very important thing to know. Its ability its second effect is the same as Harvester, where it like level modulates, where you have X targeting Y, and then the total levels become X plus Y. So in this case, since it's like its only real good target is the level 5 Infinitrack, since everything else is too high level. And you're usually just going into Earth Slicer. Sometimes you're even summoning Ancient Gearbox from your hand. By normal summon, Anchor Drill uses effect summoning box, and then you use them to go into Nigirsu. That's a good way to get over stuff like Dragoon. If you're not able to get a big body like Libe or Dora on the field, you kind of need Dingirsu if you're going to Dragoon. Derek Crane, it's not essential to the combo, but having it in the combo is super nice, since it gets you a free Dora on the field that has a pop on top of your end board, so that is super good. And if it's detached from Nixie's monster as material, you get a pop a card. So if you detach it off a Dora or a Libe, you just get to pop an extra card, which is really good. And finally, for our, I guess you could count Ancient Gearbox as a combo piece, but they don't necessarily, there are a couple cards that don't necessarily do anything proactively, and you don't really want to draw them. It's Citadel and Gearbox. Citadel's actually fine to draw in certain scenarios, like if you have Anchor Drill in your hand, you have Fortress in your hand, and you can easily get access to both those cards. Citadel does somewhat become better in those cases, but it's just not that good to draw. You're usually summoning it from your deck with the effect of Machina Overdrive. And Ancient Gearbox, which is just, you're usually searching it and getting it into your rotation with the effect of Ancient Gear Ballista, and the ability to search is really good. You just have to have it in your deck. There is a way to combo off even if you hard draw, which I will showcase in the combo tutorial, so wait for that. And that's kind of our main machine core. Hopefully I've explained it pretty well. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Triple Ash, Triple Droll. These can be any, like hand traps or traps, or all of this can be traps. One thing that has to be staple is Triple Machina Overdrive. This card is bonkers. It's able to destroy a machine to summon a Machina. It can be Citadel or even a Metal Cruncher if you already have Citadel in your graveyard. Metal Cruncher will get Search, and Citadel will also trigger in the graveyard since an Earth machine was destroyed to summon itself. And on top of that, while it's in the graveyard, this is its most important effect. Well, it's not the most important effect, but it's such a good effect to shuffle 3 of your machines that are banished or in the graveyard, and you shuffle them into the deck and draw 1. This just increases your grind potential off the charts. It's just such a good card. For extra deck, I believe I've just explained most of this while explaining the main deck stuff. Zeus, you're usually going to hard summon with Harvester's effect, and if you don't hard summon it, you can summon it during main phase 2. Libe, Super Dora Libe, it's very easy to get access to these if you have the level 10 extender plus a summon of Anger Knuckle, so you get free access to both these cards. Libe, just such a good OTK tool. It also outs Dragoon. We have Earth Slicer. Just remember, every Xyz monster with Infinite Track in its name has the following abilities. One, when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it's able to attach it to, it's able to like consume it as material, and it's also able to revive itself from the graveyard by tributing a Machine Link monster. And Goliath is your main target for tribute fodder for it. Earth Slicer, I believe I explained, just detaches a bunch of cards, pops a bunch of cards. Dingirsu actually has a couple of really good interactions. First off, pretty obvious, send a card your opponent controls to graveyard. Non-targeting, non-destruction removal, really good. So if your opponent has like a BLS link, you can out that too. There are just a lot of things this thing can out. And on top of that, its effect to protect cards you control is very important too, since it can protect stuff from Machina Overdrive, Citadel, or even just in general to protect stuff. It's just very, very good. It's a pity it's a dark machine, so you can't like use it after using Dozer, otherwise it would be broken. But Dingirsu, really, really good card. Next up, we have the Mountain Smasher. The main sort of idea behind this is that if you have enough like extenders, you're able to summon a Mountain Smasher with a Goliath underneath. If you already have like enough access to a Bullet Train, but the combo only works if you have access to a Bullet Train. I'd probably cut this for something more meaningful, but I couldn't really find anything better. And that scenario where you're with Harvester and a level 5 just comes up so often, I kind of had to put it, although I don't want to put it. But there's just not a lot of things that are better than this, just because of Harvester. Still 3100 attack beat stick, really good. It also outs Dragoon if your opponent doesn't answer it. We have the River Stormer. River Stormer is a pretty popular card in non-Infinite Track decks too. I believe some super heavy samurai variants play it. It's kind of insane. It allows you to take an Earth Machine from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to graveyard. Your main targets are the usual suspects: Express Train, Bullet Train, Derek Crane, Fortress, all of that stuff. Generally just extra extenders or even combo pieces if you don't have them in rotation. So Rivstormer, very, very versatile card. We have the Megaclops. You're never making this. BLS link. It actually comes up a fair bit since you don't have a lot of generic links, and if your one gives you kaiju or something, you don't have a lot of good ways to get rid of the kaiju. And BLS is actually pretty nice since there are actually a good lot of decks that cannot out a 4500 attack BLS. Stuff like Invoke Dogmatica comes to mind. Like, they literally cannot out a 4500 BLS. They cannot use stuff like Ice Dragon's Prison since we have no warriors in this deck. It's just really difficult to out. On top of that, its effects to banish a card will slowly add up over time if they leave it alive. So if it hits the board and your opponent doesn't have an out, you win the duel. You have Cleaford Genius. It's a nice machine link. It's kind of your main way to out Winda. Not really though. Winda, if you're against Winda with this deck just struggled so much against the Shaddoll matchup. I could talk for hours about how horrible the Shaddoll matchup is for this deck. You've got Ariel messing up your graveyard. You've got you've got Winda just stopping you from ODKing. It's protected from card effects, which is your main way of removal. It's just so bad. I'll talk about that in another video maybe, but Genius, it can sometimes outwin that. You're just losing too much steam at that point. We have Ancient Gear Ballista. It just searches Gearbox in a nutshell off 2 Earth Machines for free. Remember, it specifically has to be Earth Machine, nothing else. And its ability to change your opponent's monsters to 0 attack and defense sometimes comes into play if you're like popping heavy forward and you don't need it and you're going for the ODK. I guess it could come up, well, not really though. Next up, Anger Knuckle, probably the most important card in the extra deck. It's a card used in the resource loop, and it's very recursive. It's able to send a monster from your handed graveyard to summon level 10 machine, i.e. Super Express Bullet Train. And as I said, resource loop is one of the most important factors of the deck, which allows it to grind and just pressure your opponent out of the game. And it's also able to recover itself from the graveyard. So if you're in a simplified game state, it is able to summon itself back and as fodder for stuff like Brutal Dozer or Trencher, which is very, very important. Next up, we have the Triple Goliath. You need Triple Goliath. You're constantly linking into ones. It's for a lot of reasons. Either it's just fodder for Tunneler. It could be fodder for you to attach stuff to the Infinitrax. It could be just to send a Trencher or a Tunneler to the graveyard. It could be to send maybe even a Harvester or Anchor Drill to the graveyard to revive off Trencher. It's just such... Link ones are just such valuable cards. And Link ones, even if it's like really bad, as long as materials are generic enough, it will see play. It's just so insane. So the side deck, it can be whatever you want depending on the format. I've just gone for triple Antia, triple Nib, triple Dark Ruler, and a lot of back row hate. Since this deck, it's not that good against grindier not grindier matchups. Well, it just hurts from decks that can really just recover a ton and out pressure you. Well, decks can't out pressure you, but you get the point. Since your main main sort of removal is stuff like Citadel, Torrential Overdrive, or even Dinomischus, it can be a bit difficult to out decks that either have indestructible monsters, Cough Winda, and Eldritch, and just kind of stuff like that. Well, back row hate is just generic. The only reason I'm running 2 Lightning Storms is because it's third copy of Featherduster. Don't call me out on that. So I guess I'll go to kind of the combo tutorials now, which are your main focus points. Right here we have your main combo: Harvester, Metal Cruncher, Machina Redeployment, Heavy Forward, any of your starters. Basically just a normal summon and access to Brutal Dozer. You're going to summon the Brutal Dozer from your hand, use its effect, summon a Trencher, link into a Goliath. You do not link into a second Goliath. The Ballista you're going to summon here is your 5th summon. So if they Nibiru, you're still getting that search, which is very important. Otherwise, if you go into a second Ballista just to fill your graveyard preemptively for the Nibiru, for the Tunneler, since that's what you're doing as your main turn 1 setup, filling up your graveyard for Tunneler, there's no point of it if you can't even get access to Tunneler in the first place. So as your 5th summon, you go into Ballista, use its effect, search a copy of Box. Box will search Tunneler. You're going to use Tunneler's effect in order to tribute the Ballista summon itself. Use Trencher, revive Dozer, go into Riverstormer. You're going to use Riverstormer, detaching Tunneler, searching a copy of Bullet Train. You're You're going to use Bullet Train's effect in hand. Since all monsters you control are Earth machines, you can summon it. You now link into a Goliath. You're going to use Riverstormer's Graveyard effect to summon itself, and then you're going to link into second Goliath, go into Anger Knuckle, use Thunder's Graveyard effect, shuffle 5 cards, all 3 Goliaths, 1 Ballista, and whatever starter you had. Shuffle all of them to your deck and draw 2. Do keep in mind you have 4 other cards in your hand. And now you're going to go to your end phase. Bullet Train will trigger, adding back Dozer. And keep in mind you have 4 other cards in your hand. They can be traps, hand traps, whatever, just form of destruction. And then during your opponent's turn, this is just a resource loop in action. You discard Ancient Gearbox, summon back Ballista, then you use whatever you have, Torrential Tribute, Overdrive, Trap Trick, any of that stuff in order to pop the Bullet Train, or even if your opponent just attacks over it, it just gets destroyed. And then during the end phase, Bullet Train will trigger, recovering the Gearbox, and Gearbox will also trigger, searching a copy of Trencher. Well, it's usually Anchor Drill, but since you already have the Anchor Drill in hand, I'm just going for Trencher here. So that's kind of your main turn 1 play here. You get a resource loop in action, you get draw 2 that goes into disruption. It's just really, really neat, and you have just so much card advantage and so many cards to use. For our kind of second replay, right here, it's loading. We're going to see you play with the Ancient Gearbox in your hand. I'll just bottom deck a few cards. Now we have our starter plus Ancient Gearbox in hand. You can use Metal Cruncher's effect, searching Brutal Dozer. We're going to reveal 3 of them, add it to our hand. Use Brutal Dozer's effect, summon itself. And it's kind of going to be the same thing, but instead of summoning Trencher, we are summoning Tunneler. This is just to get the Tunneler in our graveyard preemptively, so that we can shuffle back the box before making Ballista. We're going to go ahead and use Riverstorm's effect, search Bullet Train, and it's kind of going to be sort of like the end of the last one. We're going to link into Goliath, link into an Anger Knuckle. We're actually going to use Riverstorm's, actually we're first going to use Anger Knuckle in order to send the box to our graveyard to dump summon back Bullet Train. We're going to summon back Riverstormer, and then we go into Goliath here, and then into the Ballista, since we have 2. Actually, not Ballista, sorry, I'm messing it up. Before you make Ballista, you need the box in your deck, so you're going to banish the Tunneler, shuffle back a couple of cards. It's going to be your starter. You're going to shuffle Anger Knuckle for definite and your box. Unfortunately, I had to shuffle Riverstormer. Usually, you would try to, if you open Harvester, you should link it into an extra Goliath, so that you have the extra Earth machine. You want stuff like Riverstormer in your graveyard in rotation, just because it's a very valuable resource in the graveyard. What I didn't discuss in this last replay was you want to keep Bullet Train, Riverstormer, and Brutal Dozer in your graveyard. Bullet Train for obvious reasons, Riverstormer important card, and Brutal Dozer you're just recovering it. It's important to remember those 3 cards. So now with box in your graveyard shuffled back with the Tunneler, you're able to go into a Ballista. Ballista will search box. Box will use its effect, searching a copy of Trencher. Since it has 500 attack. You're going to use Trencher, summon itself, link into Goliath, summon back Dozer, go into Anger Knuckle, pass. During end phase, Bullet Train will trigger, adding back the Brutal Dozer. So it's kind of the same as last time. It's a bit weaker since you have more cards in your deck when you activate the Tunneler, but it's fine. It's fine. It's like a 1% difference, and it doesn't even make a difference. You have the Dynamiscus, you've got the Ash Blossom, all's good. You still have the resource loop, and it's a resource loop that really makes this deck so resilient and sticky. If your opponent just absolutely shatters their board, if they cannot kill you, they lose. Yeah, I was ignoring the fortress in my hand, otherwise you could extend your plays even further. In ways I won't explain, I want you to explore them yourself. They're just really cool lines. The deck just has so much like potential. It's missing a good pilot basically. It's a really difficult deck to pilot. It's got big toolbox, tons of lines of play, and it's really hard to use. And well, hopefully this video was helpful, to say the least. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, as it really does help the channel. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.